Hi guys. I finished chapter 27 today, and I finished it fairly early because that turned out to be really short. I will need to beef up that chapter later because it ended up being like 1,500 words, which is actually what we're going to talk about today. But since I have extra time, we're going to talk about 5 ways that you can boost your word count while adding to your story. This is mainly for underwriters, obviously. Keep in mind that these things should be used in moderation because otherwise you might end up with a lot of fluff, and that's not what we're looking for. We're not looking for doing one round of edits to add a bunch of useless junk and then another round of edits later to inevitably have to remove a bunch of the junk that you didn't need in the first place. So keep it in mind that we should be doing these things in moderation and only using it where it actually adds to the story. But still, even with that, if you are an underwriter like myself, you should find that this helps beef up your word count quite a bit. With this, a lot of these really come down to just show instead of tell, but I want to be a little bit more specific about that because I want to really delve into certain areas you might look into showing versus telling to make it a little bit easier to spot those areas and how you can beef up your word counts there. Also, we've all heard show, don't tell a million goddamn times, and I'm sure you don't want to hear it again. So we're going to talk about 5 different things that you can look for that are areas in your writing that you might be able to beef up your word count with just by adding some stuff there. Okay. First thing we're going to talk about is looking for opportunities to set the scene. If you're anything like me, you totally forget to set the scene all the time until about halfway through the chapter. Then you realize, oh wait, nobody knows what the hell they're looking at. I have this bad habit of starting off the chapter in the middle of action, or like dead serious. Probably like 50% of my chapters start off with like quotes where somebody's just saying something. And it doesn't really set a picture or anything, but I enjoy setting the scene. I don't know why I miss it, but I just tend to forget it. I tend to think of it as boring, and I don't think people are going to want to hear it. But people, well, a lot of people, not everybody, believes in wanting to have a scene set for them. But I'm one of those people that likes the scene set for me in books. I like to be able to visualize the majority of things, if not all of things. One book recently that I was re-listening to that I realized only on the second listen, I didn't even think about it the first listen, I didn't realize that they were doing scene setting, was Ernest Cline's Ready Player One. And I was listening to where he was describing the stacks where he grew up, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is awesome world building. Not only that, but he's doing a fantastic job of setting the scenes. And I was listening to the audiobook, and he probably went on for a good like 5 minutes on that. So there was definitely a lot of words that got added, and it really did add to the story. It helped me really imagine what this character's life situation was like and stuff. That's what you want to do with your scene building. You don't want to just add in a bunch of useless details or add in a bunch of redundant details when you've already gone over that location before. You don't want to keep going over it again. But definitely look for opportunities where you can set the scene and maybe utilize some of your world building in there. That's kind of fun. And make the place where your character is seem more real and more alive, the location it's in. That's one thing that I found really helps me boost my word count when I go back in and I realize I haven't done that at all. And then I get to add like a whole paragraph, and I love setting the scene. I don't know why I always skip it because it's really fun. But yeah, that's tip number 1. I'm going to come back with the other tips in a minute, but I'm going to totally close my blinds because my blinds are trying to blind me. I'll be right back. Okay, sorry, it's dark now. Okay, the second tip that I found really helps me to get some extra words on the page and also adds to the story is looking for opportunities to add introspection for your characters. Now, you don't want to go off on some big tangent where they're going through some giant soliloquy about they could go on a soliloquy about the stupidity of people solving their life problems with soliloquies. Let's see if anybody can figure out what I'm referencing with that. Shakespeare. Um, but yeah, you don't want to go into useless stuff as far as introspection, but introspection can really add to the story. If you don't have any introspection, all you're relying on is narrative and dialogue, then it gets really limited. It feels kind of one-dimensional because you can really only see so much that way. You can see what the narrator perceives is what the character is thinking or assuming or whatever, unless you're doing first person, in which case you are the narrator. I don't really do first person typically. I will be in the future, but I'm partial to third person limited or even third person omniscient. But you're really limited if you're not doing any introspection, and adding some well-placed introspection will not only boost your word count, but can add some dimension to your chapters and to your story, and will really help develop your characters and make them seem more like real persons, because then your person who's reading feels like they're inside their mind and they can feel more like these are their thoughts that they're having in this scary situation or whatever situation it is, you know, whatever they're experiencing. So that's another tip to help boost your word count. Next one that I have is looking for opportunity to add scene details. Oh, I'm sorry. I can't. I'm trying to do this scripted. Look, I got like all these Post-its and I'm like trying to read my horrible scribbly handwriting. Sensory details, sorry. So look for opportunities to add sensory details. So the way that this is different than setting the scene is, I mean, yes, you can definitely use sensory details, and using sensory details will help you set the scene, but you don't have to just add sensory details in places where you're setting the scene specifically. You can add sensory details even to like action tags and such. For example, if your character is like really pissed off at something, maybe they're gritting their teeth and they realize that their jaw is getting sore from how long they've been like standing there like this, like pissed off at this thing, trying to mask their emotions so that somebody doesn't find out they're pissed or something like that. But you can add these details in sensory details. You don't, if you're anything like me, I tend to totally forget all the senses other than sight for some reason when I'm first writing the first draft of a chapter. And then later on, I have to go in and intentionally add things like touch and smell and taste, which doesn't seem to come up very often unless like they've just been punched in the mouth or they're eating something or drinking something. I haven't found a lot of opportunities to add taste to it. Or like maybe if they've like just jumped into the water of the ocean, they might be tasting salt water, you know? You've got sounds. Sounds and sights are the ones that I tend to use the most, and I think those are the ones that are easiest for most people to remember. But you don't want to forget smell. You don't want to forget taste. You don't want to forget touch. There's also other sensory things that you can describe, and I believe somebody else used this in one of their videos, and I had to look it up because I thought it was really interesting. I don't remember the term for it, but it's basically the sense that your body has when you can sense the location of your different body parts in like comparison to each other. Like when you have your hand on your knee or something like that, and you're not really thinking about what your knee feels like to your hand. It's more like that. It's that sense of awareness that two body parts are touching, kind of thing. I don't have a better way of explaining it on the fly here like this. I apologize. But there are loads of different ways that you can describe sensory things, which will add to the realistic feeling and immersion of your scenes, as long as you're not overdoing it. I mean, you don't want to describe all the senses that your character is having in every single like scene and location and stuff that they're in, because that gets excessive. So again, practice some moderation as far as those, but that's something that could definitely be used to add to your scenes and add to your word count. All right, next thing. All right, just a second. Let's see. Okay. Oh, yeah, so we were actually just kind of talking about this a second ago. Look for opportunities if you're kind of bare bones on your dialogue, which I am not. I actually overuse these, but I have seen people who are bare bones in their dialogue, and I get super confused as to who the hell's talking when I'm reading those kind of things. But if you're an underwriter, and you happen to be the type of underwriter that is very bare bones on your dialogue sections, you might want to consider looking for opportunities to add action tags next to your dialogue. You don't want to always just be doing dialogue tags, he said, she said, and stuff. Obviously, you can use those, but you want to diversify it, because otherwise it ends up sounding a little bit like the beginning of the Tao of Pooh. If anybody else has read that book, I love that book, and I know that they intentionally overused he said, she said in this one part, but the whole time I'm like, that was like 7 saids in a matter of 2 paragraphs. So obviously you don't want to overuse those, and the way that you can kind of diversify that as well as get more words on the page is do action tags, because clearly saying he or she said is on, or bleh, he said, she said on the seashore. Clearly saying he or she said something is only like 2 words. He said, she said. Whereas if you said they clenched their fist and gritted their teeth. I'm a fan of gritting your teeth, apparently. I used that example already. But they clenched their fist and gritted their teeth as they snarled a reply or something like that. I mean, that kind of had a dialogue tag in it as well. But you see how that obviously is way more words than just saying, he said this, or he said this irritably, or something like that. So clearly that will add words. Plus, it helps break up if you have too many just plain old dialogue tags. If you throw some action tags in there, that's going to add to your scene. Obviously, this is another one. Don't overdo it, because if you do an action tag with every single thing that you say, it's going to interrupt your pacing, and it's going to make your dialogue seem a little clunky. And it's going to make your dialogue seem like it's going slower because you're adding too many words. So again, moderation, like we've talked about before. But look for opportunities where that could add to your scene and add to your story. The 5th thing is look for missing scenes, or scenes that were summarized that shouldn't be. I'm really bad at this. Oh my gosh, I'm so bad at this. I'm realizing that at the end of a lot of my chapters, I like to end them without actually like concluding what happened. And I realized that I'm like, you know what? I should probably do something about that. Or I summarize the end of the chapter because I'm like, it's the end of that chapter. Let's just summarize it. When I really shouldn't have just let it drop off the way it did, because it's bad for my pacing. It comes off sounding weird, and it sounds like I got like lazy at the end of the chapter. So if you find yourself summarizing parts of the story, that maybe you were just trying to get through because you weren't super into them at the time, you were tired, and you were just trying to get done with the chapter, like I've been doing a lot, that maybe you should go back in and unsummarize stuff that you had previously summarized. I'm sorry if my light looks super weird on this, by the way. It's like really distracting me. I don't know why my light keeps going in and out. I think I need to like set my focus on like where to put the light on this. Maybe that'll help. Sorry, guys. And if you know me at all, you know I'm not going to edit that shit out. Anyway, we were talking about adding in scenes that were skipped or scenes that were summarized, adding detail to. So, for example, I had a scene that I had previously summarized that I went back in during some time that I set aside to do some bulk up editing, where I basically just said, essentially, and they make a plan to do this thing. And what I did is I went back in and I actually went over how they came up with this plan and the kind of the details of it, and the one person who came up with the plan kind of explaining it to the other people, and those people asking questions and raising their own concerns about the legitimacy or the likelihood that that plan was going to actually be applicable, or sorry, that's not the right way to phrase that, be workable and actually turn out good for them. And that seriously ended up adding like 3 pages to what was previously just summarized as in, James said, here we have a plan, and then it just skips to the next scene. So that's actually kind of a combination of where I summarized and I also just fully skipped part that really needed to be done, because I didn't want my audience just having to assume, readers, to have to just assume what the plan was. So not only did I kind of skip that opportunity for a scene, but I kind of summarized it. I said he was explaining the plan, but I didn't actually go through the showing how he was explaining the plan. I just said he explained the plan, which again is bringing it back to show versus tell. But I'm trying to stay away from saying that. And that was my 5 tips on things that you can look at to maybe help beef up your word count. I have one bonus one for you, however. Look for missing perspectives. And this one kind of goes along with the last one. That's why it's kind of a bonus one. It's kind of like a half of one. Look for missing perspectives that might help with the story. What I mean by this, and this may not apply to you if you're doing first person, like if you're doing first person limited and you are staying in one perspective the entire book, you may not be able to use this one. I apologize. But if you're doing third person and you're doing multiple perspectives like I'm doing, then a lot of times you'll find where you can add to the story and not have to glance over certain things if you do certain chapters or add certain perspectives for different characters that are in it. Plus, also, it will help in making those other side characters seem a little bit less like prop people who are just kind of there because you need more people than just your main person and maybe 1 or 2 other people. If you get to see things from their perspective for a while. That's actually why I ended up adding like seriously 7 chapters to mine. Probably more than 7 chapters actually, because I was just going to do James, my captain's perspective, and Pete, the boy on the island's perspective originally. And I wrote out these chapters and I was like, you know what? I'm not able to present some of this information with just these 2 people's perspectives. Also, I'm realizing I'm going to be lucky if this whole thing comes out to like 35,000 words, which doesn't feel like I would have actually covered everything I wanted to cover. So my mom. My mom pointed out to me, because I was asking her about her feedback on my first chapter, and she's like, well, I really like James. He seems like a real person, and I really like empathize with him on this and this and the other thing. But she's like, but I feel like Simon's kind of falling flat. Like he's kind of just there. And I was like, yeah, I've been bothered by that too. I totally realized it. And then for some reason I was opposed to the idea of adding another person into the mix. I think it's just because I thought it was going to make it too complicated. And finally, once I decided that I was going to add Simon's perspective, not only did that end up adding like 7 chapters so far in the book. I want to say it's like 7 chapters. It might be more than that. But it helped me cover this time gap, which comes back to skipping scenes and stuff, which I have a habit of doing. I have this part where James was basically unconscious for several days. So I had a several day time gap. There was just a waste opportunity for getting more stuff done, getting some fantastic character development done to where Simon doesn't seem flat anymore. And in fact, I want to say that he's kind of stealing the show a bit, because I kind of like him more than who's supposed to be my main protagonist now. Because he's fun to write, because he's real sarcastic and he's awesome. I really like Simon, and I kind of like him more than James, and I need to work on James now to get that more balanced out. But yeah, look for missing perspectives, because you shouldn't just, if you've got your heart set on only doing something from 1 or 2 person's perspective, like I did, and you find yourself unable to really represent the story with just those two perspectives in a good way, or you find yourself making stretches that make those characters have to be in basically two places at once for things to make sense where they're actually seeing things happening, then maybe consider adding another character's perspectives, or maybe two, or however the hell many you want. I mean, look at Game of Thrones. You've got way more than that. So don't think that you're limited to only doing a perspective from one character unless that's really what you have your heart set on. But that can really add a lot of word count if you're doing different people's perspectives. And it will also make a lot of your side characters or like co-protagonists and stuff seem less one-dimensional too, because you can actually build up and the audience can see what they're thinking and how they're feeling about stuff without them having to explicitly say it to your main protagonist. That's pretty much the end of my advice. This is a super long video. I apologize. It's like, oh gosh, it's gonna be so long. If you make it through this, I really hope that this was helpful to somebody who's listening out there. Let me know if you're liking these more structured videos where it's not just a vlog on how many words I did that day. I actually put some effort into this. Like, look at these Post-its with my horrible scribbly writing. It's so bad. But I put some effort into it today, so I hope you appreciate that. And give me your feedback on whether or not you want me to keep doing videos more like this and going over some of the things that I've learned through my writing so far that might help you as well. Alrighty, you guys have a good one. Bye.